Hello and welcome back to The Better Opinion. I am once again here attempting to get this working alongside my co-host Mansor. Mansor, hello. How's it going?
It's going well. Maybe it'll work.
Maybe it'll work. Well, I think it turned out okay last time. It just, a hiccup in the middle, everything freezing. Normal stuff, normal tech stuff.
Well, either this will come out first or the other one will. So you'll either have no idea, you'll have every idea.
Yeah, there you go. So, what did you want to talk about today?
I found it interesting, the kind of concept of being woke. It seems like it's being used as like an excuse both ways to like media or to say this is why people did not like my good media.
So we're talking about wokeness or the idea of wokeness.
Not really being woke, but more it being used to just as an excuse, it feels like.
So this is an interesting subject to me because I was thinking about this the other day. Mm-hmm. So one of the problems, and this is true of almost any subject, but in the example of this one, there's a core concept, there's a core thing, and this core thing is real in one direction or another. Mm-hmm. But there are two opposing sides that are the loudest, and they aren't necessarily the majority. The majority kind of go at the flow. They're going to react to whatever sort of kind of leans in their direction. Mm-hmm. But if something is neutral enough, they're not going to notice whether it is pro their idea or against their idea, unless someone they like says it is pro or against their idea, right? So in the idea of wokeness, right, and I'm using woke, I think this is important. As a definition, whenever I use the term woke, what I mean is I'm not using it as an insult, and I am not using it as sort of like a strict real definition. I'm creating a definition off of a concept, right? So there's a concept that exists of what people think woke is. And when it's the people who it's about, they feel insulted. And when it's the people who are attacking it, it's an insult that they are using, right? But to me, go ahead. It just want to say it's like I'm not, for the purpose of this, using it like as a sided thing, rather as a definition.
From my point of view, the idea of being woke is that there are certain things that used to be okay that are not as thought of as okay now. Like it was at some point it was okay to like have panty shots. Now it's not as okay.
In like anime. Or like anime video games, or
I don't think they stopped. Have they?
No. Well, no, because the Japanese don't care. They're not participating. This is it's only when it's about the West that those things happen, right? Like the Japanese create something, and then maybe the publisher goes, "Well, we can't send this to the West as it is," right? So when I talk about wokeness, what I really mean is progressivism, where the objective, because it can be light progressivism. So I'd say reducing panty shots isn't always a bad thing. And the question is, why are you doing it, right? So like, I don't really need panty shots, right? Rule 34 exists. It's the age of the internet. So I don't necessarily need panty shots. And I think if someone said, I don't think this actually contributes to what we're making, that's not woke, right? That's just saying, I'm looking at it and I don't think this contributes to what I'm trying to create.
It's probably doing more harm than it is helping.
Or it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
So something I talk about when I talk about movies is I feel like too many movies have romance. And people go, my film teachers used to always tell me, well, romance is how you connect to the character. And I go, that's not true. I don't need it. Romance can be good. I don't dislike romance. I love the anime Toradora, which is just a long romance, right? But when I'm watching a 2-hour movie and 30 minutes of it is devoted to these two characters being forced to have chemistry, right? I didn't need it, right? Like if I'm here for a sci-fi action flick, I don't need to know that the guy bangs a girl at the end or the girl bangs a guy at the end. I don't care. Right? I'm here for the sci-fi action. that doesn't mean that no romance can exist. Maybe they're already in love. Maybe they already have a relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe this defines a dynamic in the story, but I don't need sex scenes. And it's not because I'm a prude. I'm fine with sex, but
Right.
it's a waste of a limited amount of time that I don't need. And
It feels like it's unnecessary and doesn't really contribute to the story you're watching.
I would say this even applies to books. There's a series I like called Altered Carbon. You heard of it?
You've told me about. I think you've told me about what you're about to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. So there's the show, and the show is very different from the books. But in the books, the author, I think he just gets horny halfway through writing. And I mean this literally, not as an insult. I think he's sitting there writing his book, and he has all his characters, and he really likes his characters. He has an image of them in his head, because halfway through every book, he just writes one chapter that is just literotica. That's all it is. It is a step-for-step explanation of how he put his genitals into her genitals and then came hard. Like, this is, it talks about everything.
Yeah.
And so it's down to the detail where, like, this is just porn.
Yeah.
And that's not offensive to me, but I do feel that if you had just told me they had sex, that nothing would have changed in the story. It didn't add anything to me, And so that's what I'm talking about, is that I don't have a problem with it. So how does this relate to the topic of being woke? Something that is woke would go and look at that and say that it is wrong. There's a moral reason this has to be removed because there's something it does wrong, right? So from the perspective of the progressive or the person who is woke, the is woke person would look at this thing and say, this thing is wrong because it objectifies a female character, or it's just a male fantasy, or whatever negative they perceive to exist.
Yeah.
And saying this needs to be removed because it is bad, and it is bad because of moral reasons, that's woke. But to say this shouldn't be in here because it doesn't contribute and is a waste of my time to read, that's not woke, that's just criticism. Now, the anti-woke person would say it must stay. And the reason it must stay is because they perceive its removal as a attack on some sort of status quo, or by those woke people getting involved in their media. And if that woke person had never spoken, they may not even feel it needs to stay.
But now they do.
But now they do. Yeah. So that's how I would define, in the purpose of, I guess, for this conversation, that's how I would define woke, right? Because there is such a thing as doing the same action for non-woke reasons. It's interesting, though, that you brought this up. So I have a reason I actually have an example of this. But before I sort of take the stage, as I always do, what was your what triggered this line of thought?
I just saw people enjoying Dead Rising and the new Dead Rising remaster. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. I've seen some screenshots, people complaining about, like, the fat guy is no longer looks like NTR man. Now he just looks like a zombified fat man.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw all this stuff and it's like just minor things they removed, like taking panty shots of a dead person no longer gives a bonus. I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then all of a sudden I see people, I'm not going to buy this game because this was removed. And I'm thinking to myself, but why? What have you really lost? And I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't even necessarily have to be that they are, it's like, removing it because they think a mob's going to come after them. Maybe the creator just, I don't know, became older and once they have like a daughter and it's like, I don't really want my daughter to see I'm giving extra points for taking panty shots of a dead person. It's like,
right. It goes back to the motivation. You don't know what their motivation was. I understand. So that's interesting. The problem with this topic in general is because so bringing it back to what I was talking about before a little bit, for the purpose of responding to you, there is this sort of culture war that's going on, right? This cultural battle. I don't want to call it a culture war. That makes it too significant. Yeah. There's a cultural battle, an ideology, right? And it is real, right? So there are people on both sides And I'm not trying to be like both sides, but there are people on both sides of this argument who truly believe in their side. And there are people who feel frustrated that, and I think reasonably so, that there are another group of people who are becoming heavy-handed in media to try to remove anything that we might like, and do have ideologies that in some cases are quite dangerous. I think one of the things that bothers me is that, generally speaking, progressives are treated as the good guys in anything.
Yeah.
But their idea of being progressive often, to me, almost seems worse than the thing they're trying to fight. Not always, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that, when someone says racism bad, that's not true. Racism is bad, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things I've noticed, for example, is that have you ever noticed that whenever someone puts a black woman in a game, that 90% of the time their idea of what a black woman looks like is just like they found the ugliest black woman they could find and said, this is it. This is what all black women look like. We need to put this in every game. And, my partner is black. She's quite beautiful and does not look like these characters. Now, I don't take it personally, but when I look at those people and they go, this is real, this is progressive, I go, is it? How many black people do you know? Like there's this, they seem to think that like only the most exaggerated features and the most like, I don't know, it reminds me of that video from Extra Credit where they just said that orcs were black. And I go, I don't know. When I look at a black person, I don't really see an orc, right? Like it's this idea of you almost give away that you don't know anyone from these racial groups you're defending.
I also think it's weird what people find racist. Have you heard of Ahmed the terrorist?
Oh, Ahmed the dead terrorist. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised when people were very mad at him for being racist because I am Afghan.
Right.
My family is Afghan. It's like my uncles would pull up Ahmed the dead terrorist for us to watch and laugh at.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's very popular in the Middle East. And that character is his most popular character in the Middle East.
Which was what confused me. Is because I often find the people who find these people racist are not the race that they're purporting to.
Yeah, they're getting offended for someone else.
Because, yeah, I'll be very frank. From my point of view, we do not like terrorists.
Sure.
A lot of us do not like terrorists, and we find this like exaggeration funny.
Right. You're not, because the joke that they're making isn't that they're making fun of Middle Easterners. They're making fun of terrorists. Jeff Dunham. I think Jeff Dunham, retroactively, if I watch a Jeff Dunham skit, I don't find it very funny. Right.
Yeah.
Like I've grown out of it. When I was younger, it was very funny. My humor has gotten better with age.
Yeah.
But Ahmed the dead terrorist is not a joke at Middle Eastern people's expense. It's a joke at terrorists' expense. And he has and all of his characters are stereotypes. His white character is a hillbilly, right? His Mexican character is a jalapeno, right? Like he makes fun of a stereotype from every racial group. One of his characters is just like a black pimp, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like it's kind of like when you get a caricature artist, a street artist who does caricatures, and like they exaggerate one of your most prevalent features.
It's going to be very weird to get mad at them for what you paid them to do.
Right, and it's something that they do universally. It's part of the act.
One thing that I'm afraid of when we try to just not only try to like shoot down this sort of stuff is not only are we trying to like walk away from like what we actually find offensive, we kind of hide what racism is.
Sure, yeah. We're blocking, not blocking, we're obscuring what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you make a joke, when a group of people who care about each other are together and they make jokes at each other's expense, they're not, I know people all have an example. It's like, oh, well, I didn't like when my friends did this, but I didn't have the balls to tell them. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
But that's not, they were not doing it with the intent of being prejudiced to you.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, they were doing it out of jest with someone they cared about.
Oh, I think I remember you had a thing about Apu that you told
Oh,
before.
Apu from The Simpsons.
Because there was this guy who was offended by Apu, but I don't know. I watched The Simpsons from when I was younger, and I always thought to myself, I never had a negative thought about Apu specifically.
No.
Everyone else like had a thing that they were like kind of not really. Homer was not the most in his head. He wasn't the most intelligent person.
Yeah, he was stupid, and
Mo was depressed all the time, and I forget who. Principal Skinner was kind of mad.
everyone was screwed up except Apu.
Yeah, Apu was
His biggest problem was, can I arranged marriage? I don't know. Oh, actually, it worked out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like Apu addressed some cultural problems with Indian culture, and it addressed it by saying, well, here's how you make the best of it. I would say that Apu was probably the only character who solved his problems. He was the best example of a person on that show, I think that, and the irony is that by attacking Apu, all that happened was Apu went away, and now we just don't have that character, right? Bringing it back though, so when we talk about this subject, the thing that happens is you have a side that's treated as the good guys, right?
Yeah.
And those good guys can end up being negative in and of themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
we abscond or not abscond. We reject all beauty, right? Like if a woman is beautiful, then that is objectification, right? We reject all heteronormative stuff. We reject white people, and it's like, oh well, white people exist. Just like we should say that maybe the cast shouldn't be all white, we can also say that they shouldn't be non-white.
I think another problem comes along if you try to put that into all media you create. You kind of get rid of your literature cache of like what people thought at the time.
Sure, yeah, that's
Because
true.
I've been reading the West Fear and Loathing from Las Vegas.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, yeah.
From Hunter S. Thompson. And
yeah.
it was like a very interesting look into how people saw things in, I think, the 70s. And I've also read Tess of D'Urberville's, which was also an interesting look of how they thought back then of how people should react to each other. I forget his name, but I know the author of that was often very critical of how women were treated at the time. And in all of his writing, he often went over that. Then there's also another book I've read. I think I've given to my mom. I think recently became a Netflix series. It was like Flowers for the Stolen, which was about in South America how a group of women were hiding that they were women. They were showing themselves like there's no women in this town. There's only men, and that if they revealed themselves, it's like I don't know what you'd call the cartel would like pick them up and do whatever. Yeah.
So first off, if you liked Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, there's a comic book series that I really like called Transmetropolitan, which the main character is based off of Hunter S. Thompson.
I've been interested in picking that up.
It's a good series. It's good. I owned all of it. My friend and I did a trade. He gave me a bunch of Deadpool comics. And I gave him like half of my collection to read through, and we were supposed to swap back, and then it just never happened. So I have half of a series, which sucks because I like owning the whole set, but it's a really good series. But one of the so I think to give sort of a solidified look at something that relates to what I'm talking about, Concord, the video game that failed so spectacularly.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting feature with this topic. Whenever you talk about it, there is two kinds of people. People who will be like, oh, they worked so hard to make it woke that it made it fail. And then there are also people who say it failed because it was badly marketed, badly this, that, and the other. and it's not the wokeism, and they're both right and they're both wrong.
I don't know. The game just looks so. I don't know it just looks so boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be very frank. I know they tried to like put the Overwatch cinematics, but I thought those sucked. They did what they kind of just did Guardians of the Galaxy, which I thought was okay.
So I agree with you. Here's the thing. If you let go of any of your predisposed opinions on one side of the argument or other, if you just shed your brain of the Anita Sarkeesians and Mark Kearns of the universe, let go of the brain rot.
Well, trust me, I had no idea of either side.
So you let go of the brain rot and you look at it, you realize what happened. What happened is that a group of people set out to be as progressive as possible as a primary vision when making a hero shooter competitive game. Now, they wanted to make a successful hero shooter competitive game.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
But the vision was to make Overwatch, but somehow even more progressive. And Overwatch is has the most diverse cast of characters I can imagine. They've got it all. They got tiny little cute women and big buff women and fat dudes and tiny dudes and heroic dudes and gay chicks.
I think the problem with that is that you don't really make a good story or anything like that thinking I'm going to make it progressive.
Correct.
It just happens because you as a person are exposed to that. Like, I think the best romance happens when you just end up writing about it.
Because you just like two characters and you like how you're writing it and you start feeling like they're compatible for each other and you start getting in your head and writing about that and then it ends up feeling like that maybe made sense.
Because you can't force something you don't like. It is not inherent and you feel it.
Right. Yeah, no, I actually think that's true. I think my most diverse characters I've ever come up with in anything, whether it's tabletop or whatever, happened just because while I was making the character, I started messing with the concept or the appearance or the artwork or whatever, and I started going, yeah, I like this character to look this way. Oh, this character looks handsome or looks cute with these features, or it looks cool, right? I remember in the concept art for Overwatch, Mercy at one point was a black guy. And actually it looked good because black people look really good in white.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he actually looked quite cool. He's like a dude in heavy armor. And if you had given me that, I would have thought, I like Mercy as she is. I also think that would have looked cool.
Yeah.
The reason is because that looks cool. Those are good color palettes, right? And so, going to my original point is that when you set out with the objective of having as many of what you consider to be progressive, inclusive characters, you end up... Here's the thing. Ask yourself the question. Do you want your neighbors across the street to be your main characters in your hero shooter?
No.
No, because they just look like normal dudes.
And I know nothing about them.
Right. You know nothing about them, and they all look like you and me. I don't make a good hero shooter character either. The most I got going for me is I'm tall and I've got a curly mustache.
Yeah.
But I am otherwise pretty. I'm kind of doughy. I'm just sort of like a normal nerdy guy. I don't make a good hero shooter character. Characters in a game are mostly caricatures. They're extreme examples of a concept.
Yeah.
Right? And that's true in a lot of stories. And we like them because they stand out. So when you go, I want the fat cook from the diner down the road to be the guy shooting the gun in the hero shooter.
Why?
You're like, why? Maybe then you go, well, his actual outfit is he actually wears a chef hat and he says serving it up every time he throws a grenade.
Yeah,
and then you start to go, oh, okay, now I'm getting it.
Yeah.
But if all he does is go, hi, I'm Mo, you're like...
He's
okay.
he just happens, he picked up a gun, he just can shoot.
Yeah, he's just wearing a t-shirt, he's like, I'm bisexual. And you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. That's good for you, pal.
Yeah, I'm glad you could say that.
Yeah, good. we really live in a society, huh, bud?
And I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing. It's more
No,
like,
no. It's not that him being bisexual is a bad thing.
It's
That's
true.
that's the only character feature that we've been provided.
That's all he has.
Yeah. We haven't provided any other details.
It's like, and here's the thing. I'm glad that we can put these people and say that they're bisexual, gay, or whatever in a game.
Well, that we live in an era where you can do that and not be attacked.
That's
yes.
very nice, but that's also not a character.
Yeah, it's not a character. Yeah, well, that goes to the idea of like so much of stuff nowadays is I haven't written a character. What I've written is a series of concepts I've taped together and said, look, check this out.
Because here's the thing. I can't say this for like a lot of gay, bisexual, or whatever thing, but if I just see you put an Afghan person there and they said, "Hey guys, I'm Afghan," I was like, I'm not gonna say, "Hell yeah!"
Yes, finally,
It's like,
this is what I was looking for.
It's like okay,
Okay. hey guys. Imagine they put you in the game and you're just like, hey guys, I'm Mansor. I'm Afghan. What can you do?
I represent the
I'm brown. It's like, wow. And can you do anything else? I can walk with both my legs.
It's like, and we have this amputee who can walk with one of their legs.
Hey, that's, well, that might be interesting. What do they do? What's their, like, now see, now you start making it's actually they've got like two robotic legs, and the robotic legs let them like super jump. So one of their abilities is a super jump. See, now we're making a cool character.
It's like they were an ex-gymnast. It's like they're trying to figure it out with their one leg.
Yeah, and then it like turns out like they've got one of their attacks is like one of their legs has a rocket in it. They have two robot legs, and one of them is like they do like a spin kick, and like that's one of their abilities.
But you see, it's like them just being an amputee is not as interesting.
It's not a character, right? Well, that is exactly it. Because I would say if someone who is anti-woke, if I was making my hero shooter and one of the characters was an amputee who had robot legs now, and someone said to me, well, why do you have to put an amputee? That's woke. You're just trying to put disabled people. I said, well, they're not disabled. They have robot legs. They were disabled, and then they received cool robot legs. And now they're really cool because they can rocket jump with their robot legs.
It's funny because that reminds me of like that one character from Backyard Baseball who was like in a wheelchair.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, but see, this goes back to the thing of like, because I remember it was the argument with like the battle chair in D&D. It's a wheelchair. It's a magic wheelchair that statistically you would be better off always getting a battle chair you don't have to be disabled.
Yeah.
Just get the battle chair because it's immune to difficult terrain, and it has like increased speed, and it has like all these extra bonuses where you're like, yeah, no, I can walk. It's just
why would
I not ride the battle chair? Like, and people go, well, shouldn't you be allowed to do something? I said, it's not about should or shouldn't, right? It's the fact that when someone says this doesn't make sense, we live in a universe where like this would never happen either because of a solution that exists or because it would be untenable. And then you go, well, you're just not progressive enough. I go, no, that's not the problem.
The problem is it's not good storytelling.
It's not good storytelling. It's not good storytelling. And when it doesn't make sense, like if you at your table want to say I have this thing and I want, I'm fine with people using it, and everyone else is like, I had this discussion with someone about D&D. It's a little bit of a side, but it relates to this. It's the idea that there are different kinds of tables. There are tables who are just actually trying to play like Warhammer Wargaming, but with their D&D characters. They have no interest in the story. They're here just for the mechanics. And then there are people who are essentially just LARPing at a table, and they roll dice, but the dice are irrelevant because the results are just determined by the LARP.
I prefer that.
I think generally I lean more towards the LARP as well. Yeah. I think that I like mechanics because I don't want things to be 100% in the hands of just you and me agreeing that I'm allowed to do something.
Yeah.
But I think that the mechanics need to be in service to the role play. That's, to be clear, when I say should, I mean for my entertainment, because nothing about any of these is actually innately wrong.
because there's a rule about storytelling is that the reader has to kind of give up their they have
Suspend
to
their disbelief.
suspend their disbelief, and you have to make it so that's believable.
Right. You have to meet each other in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, they're agreeing to suspend their disbelief, and you're agreeing to do a good enough job that they can do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so if someone said, "Oh, I've created the battle chair because you want to play this kind of character," and everyone at the table is like, "I think that'll be fun," or funny, or whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
But when you make it an official rule and people go, "That's stupid," well, I'm sorry. It actually is stupid. You're allowed to like stupid things. You're allowed to want stupid things, but or things that don't make sense. You know, you can say, "You're right. It doesn't make sense, but we want it at our table." There's no argument against that because that's fine. It's your table, right? You're playing the game.
Yeah.
You've all agreed. You're a group of people. No one else gets to dictate what you do in your basement, right? When you play D&D. But on the other hand, if you put it in the book and then someone joins my social group and says, "I'd love to play D&D," and they show up at the table and they're like, "Oh, we don't use that." And they go, "Oh, well, you just hate crippled people." And I'd be like, "No, I don't. We just think that that's stupid and don't want it at our table." And now there's like a moral implication to your decision to not include this thing.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And
That's interesting because recently there's a lot more media in terms of D&D. Like, I think Vox Machina, the D&D movie, and all that stuff. I like the D&D movie, but I find the rest not quite as interesting.
Yeah.
If I'll be very fair. And the D&D movie I'd only really watch once.
yeah, I liked the D&D movie. There were some things in it I would say I would have liked to have seen be done differently. Like the bard actually being a bard instead of just a rogue who says he's a bard.
Yeah.
Like, that guy's a rogue who plays music, not a bard, because there was no bard spells involved. But ignoring all that, bringing it back to my original point, the thing about it, and the thing that muddies the water in any of these discussions, is that with every word that you speak, there's an assumption being made about you. Because what's happened is there's this real thing. There's a group of people who on either side, depending on, you know, right now, the progressive people are in control. And they're the ones who are at the corporations, and they're making decisions that are innately having a negative effect on the medium. They are producing bad things like Dustborn or Concord. These things where the whole goal was to be progressive, and so it's just stupid, right? Like,
the problem is the nuance is going away. I feel like, it's like, I'm going to bring this back to Overwatch. I feel like the nuance in the storytelling has also gone away in that.
Yeah. In the beginning, Overwatch felt diverse without being
It was
forced.
diverse by consequence. I would compare, if you watch like the old cinematics compared to now, there's like a huge disconnect in how storytelling is.
I can tell you why. It's because after
It's
all of
because of layoffs
Yeah.
is one thing. And I'm sorry to say to whoever's writing the Overwatch cinematics now, it's not as good.
It's not as good. No, they didn't. There's something that's missing, whether it's their skill or the direction from the executives. There's something distinctly missing.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm making is that these things do exist. There are people who are pushing an agenda, and in some ways it's subtle, and in some ways it's extreme. And it can be hard to differentiate between when it is just like an offhand decision. So it goes back to motivation.
Yeah.
And when it's intentional. Sometimes it's blatant, Concord, Dustborn, etc. But, you know, I remember everyone got so upset about the pronoun decision in Starfield, a game that's already just bad. And I promise you, beyond a shot, I swear, listen, it's okay to get angry. I'm not actually, because I think there's a legitimate gripe at a lot of these games. But I promise you that nowhere in this universe is there a version of Todd Howard who actually put any thought or emotion into that issue. They just said, how should we do this? Yeah, sure, let's do that. That more customization, better, right? That was because Starfield doesn't force anything. It just says, yeah, here you go. What do people do with Bethesda games? I think Starfield is bad, by the way, but like, what do Bethesda games do? The purpose of a Bethesda game is to give you a sandbox to mod.
Yeah. I haven't gone very far in any Bethesda game, mostly because I've gotten bored.
Well, they're just bad. Yeah, they've been bad for a long time. Just mod Skyrim some more. But you're saying,
I'll be very frank. I've been using they for a very long time, not specifically as a gender thing, but mostly because I mess up all the time.
it's easier.
It is easier.
You don't have to think about it. Yeah, you just refer to everyone as a they, and then you don't have to think about it. Well, especially on the internet when you don't know for sure what anybody is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So they, them pronouns exist to describe an other in an environment where you neither need to or cannot identify which gender to apply, right? And I think that the idea that using any gender neutral pronouns at any time is a stupid stance to take. I also think that we live in a world where we have two sexes, and being able to and there's a lot of information that comes with descriptors. So when you say he, when referring to me, to a third person, you've just told them a ton of information without even trying. You've described what my sex is, or at least what I present as publicly. So you've already informed them of a social dynamic. Whether we're trying to abolish a lot of them or not, there's a lot of societal differences that happen between the sexes or the genders. You know, there are just expectations of behavior towards women or towards men that the average person has without even trying. Even when people are trying to be as neutral as possible in their behavior, there are so many ingrained cultural niceties, performances, things that you do that are just different. And whether we want to argue whether those are good or bad is irrelevant, because we're only talking about communication. And in the purpose of communication, there is a reason those things exist, right? And when you don't provide that information, that can have its own issues. So when you identify personally, because anyone who says I identify as they, them, almost universally doesn't identify as they, them. Like, they say that, but there is a number of subconscious expectations of how you treat them that they have that lean in one direction or another.
What you're saying.
Right? I've seen it a million times. People will say this isn't true, but I swear if you just pay any attention and let go of your biases, you'll see that someone who is more feminine, who uses they, them, is going to have a level of expectation of minor micro behaviors when you deal with them that are going to lean in the feminine, and vice versa. You know, there's going to be things that'll bother them or not bother them, and they probably aren't even aware of it. So for the purposes of communication, I think completely getting rid of any gendered pronoun usage is a silly thing, right? That is mostly ego. It's people's ego. They want to, like, there's something that they're desiring control of when they do this. But at the same time, acting like allowing people to define their pronouns in a video game about customization, and, you know, being a bald guy screaming pronouns, it's boring. It's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It wasn't really relevant. In fact, all you were actually doing is choosing how the dialogue reflected towards you in a game about customization.
Yeah, because the nice thing about this is that now you can have sex with both sides. They don't have to write one if statement to check if you're. This has made it easier to program games now.
Yes, and I think that, you know, this is what I'm talking about. Is there is critical analysis of all of these things in media that we can do. We can have a critical discussion about the benefits and negatives of any of these things. But when you spend all of your time applying a morality to one side or the other, applying a position, applying a character, you make it really hard. Because there are people who will hear anything I just said and they're going to immediately go, oh, this guy's like a right wing, hates women, whatever. You know, well, they're going to apply a bunch of modifiers. And then at the same time, there are people who will see me say this isn't really a big deal and wasn't worth that level of reaction, and they're going to apply a bunch of other modifiers to me about being woke and progressive and blah, 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 blah. Instead of realizing that I really don't have emotional attachment to either of these sides, I'm being critical of the way these decisions do or don't affect an outcome in the entertainment I would like to consume. Because people, I would give you an example of, Stellar Blade came out. It's like a Chinese game, and the main character looks like a doll, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but people are like, oh my God, she's so beautiful, and finally, we're winning, guys. And to me, she's a little bit too. She's just kind of boring. Like, yes, if you asked me objectively, is this character like attractive? Like, I am not offended when someone shows me this character in a swimsuit, right? Or a close up of her butt. But like, I guess in the age of the internet and the age of being able to just go on Rule 34 or wherever, I'm not thrilled by just, it's kind of like my issue with any Chinese game, right? It's like all the characters are beautiful. And because they're all so beautiful, they all look the same. They all have big tits and big wide hips.
I think it's my problem with a lot of Chinese literature as well. It's like everyone, it's like, oh my God, he's so effeminate. Or
yeah, everything's the same, and it's a little bit boring. It's just a little bit. There's nothing for me to like grasp onto. I think that the things that make people enticing are sometimes their imperfections.
Yes.
And so I think the opposite is also a problem when we're focused on, well, real people have imperfections. And it's like, well, yes, but you're not creating an imperfection. You're creating an exaggeration. Yeah. You've taken a woman and given her a weird, you look at that new Star Wars Outlaws game, and you look at the model, the woman that they used as a model for the character, and you go, these two things, these are different pictures. These do not look like the same person. And I don't know if that's just because they're bad artists or because someone sat down and said, we gotta masculine up this person for the progressive audience. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. But she doesn't look like a real person because she doesn't look like the real person she was modeled after. And, And even if someone who is perfect does exist, like you could say, oh, well, Eve looks exactly like Eve from Stellar Blade, looks exactly like her model. I don't know if that's true because I've seen the model, but it looks a bit airbrushed to me.
Yep. There's more to a character than just what they look like.
Well, there is, but it's a matter of personal taste too. You may say, well, that she's gorgeous and she's everything I like. And that's okay, actually. Yeah. If that's really what you're into, that's fine. I would say the model that Eve is modeled after she is quite pretty. If it is not airbrushed, if it is truly that is just verbatim what she looks like, which I doubt in the world of statistics, but it's possible, then yeah, she's very pretty. But I actually probably wouldn't be very attracted to her. Like, I mean, it's hard to explain. I wouldn't be infatuated, right? Because I find that whenever someone really beautiful who has like a striking standout feature, that's usually the thing that really gets me, I
see.
And she just looks a little bit too exactly what you expect. Does that make sense?
Like she was a porcelain doll. It was like
manufactured, like designed, and so, my point is that there isn't a right or wrong here, but I think there is a criticism you're not allowed to make if you don't like if I levy these criticisms, there are people who are going to immediately add labels to that, and it's like these are real criticisms I have that have nothing to do with the culture war. I don't have a cultural or moral opinion on this subject. This is my personal taste expressed, right? But you can't even have those discussions because there's so much extra tags and thoughts and positions applied to every single facet of these kinds of analyses. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because I feel like no one even wants to listen at some point. There's some ongoing battle they're part of. It's like the Dead Rising. It's like someone just said, "Oh no, it's woke. I'm out of here." It's like
right, and it's
why?
It's like if you played it and you said, "Actually, I do think this is worse," and I think the reason is because they didn't. I can make an argument. I don't know. I haven't played the game, but let's say the game was mechanically worse in some way. And and then I said, well, you know what's happened? that now I don't find myself laughing as often because a lot of the things they removed for the sake of being tasteful ended up being less humorous. The photo game, you know, they've removed so much that now it's like, well, I'm not cackling at the edginess, right? Sometimes edginess can be quite funny, right? And I know people say, oh, edgy humor is not good, or their only personality is edgy humor, but there's a middle ground there, you know, and you could say, oh, these things aren't as good. You could also say that they spent so much time trying to make it modern and progressive that they didn't spend any time fixing things that actually needed fixing.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that is true. This is wholly made up on my part, but I could see those situations being true. And if you never even gave it a chance because you're not allowed to take panty shots for bonus points.
I think you do actually get bonus points from what I heard from someone who plays these games a lot. You just don't get the specific tag.
Ah, okay. I mean, again, I don't play it, so I can't give a critical analysis. But my point is that there is a space to say, I think Concord failed because they spent zero time asking the question, would anyone actually would a majority of people find these characters cool? What is anything about this enticing?
I think the biggest problem was probably that they spent $400 million on it. I was like, I thought to myself, they're gonna micromanage the shit out of this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was probably the point in which they kind of messed up. A new IP with that much money that's multiplayer only. I think they should have kind of gone the way that Apex Legends went. It's like, this is going to be something we're going to try out, and it blew up.
Right.
Because
I'm going to tell you something. When we talk about the character design there, everything about it is wrong. You can remove it is clear. So here's what I'm saying. It is clear that someone had a wokeness in mind when they designed it, and that creates a cascading effect of decision making, and that cascading effect of decision making leads to bad designs. But those bad designs could exist in a progressive woke environment. Those bad designs could be removed and still have made your characters whatever. But it's clear that what ended up happening was no focus on would anyone want to look at this. I always think about the idea of the character who's like this big woman in like the ugliest colored everything's pastel, and this woman she's in this the armor. She's got the minigun.
Doom.
And you look at it, everything is super round. It's any accent stuff is tube shaped. Everything is rounded.
And for some reason, she has purple lipstick.
Yeah, and the colors are bad. The shapes are bad. And then they just didn't close the helmet. If you had sharpened that armor, if you had put sharper points on it,
if they put some battle damage or something.
Battle damage. Give me some sharper edges. Make it look a little bit more futuristic, and then close the helmet. And I'm not saying because I don't want to see the person. I'm going to reference a different one, Warhammer. I have always said there are two kinds of Imperial Guardsmen. Really cool ones and really dopey looking ones. Do you know the only difference between these two?
The ones that look cool.
The ones that put their fucking gas mask on. As soon as you put the mask on, they look cool. This was even true in Darktide. If you had a guardsman and you put the helmet on, you look dopey. But if you just put the mask, not even a gas mask, just like the cloth mask, all of a sudden you look cool as fuck.
Yeah.
And
because masks are cool.
Because masks are cool. And the helmet, without the mask, it kind of looks like they're trying to stop you from hitting your head on the corner of a table.
And she doesn't look like she's ready for battle.
She does not look like she's ready for battle. And that is the thing, is that even the art style in every way had no personality. It had no, there was, the personality was kiddie pool. We're about to go in the ball pit. That's what it felt like.
And I think what you were about to say, but didn't, was that if you took any one of them out, you wouldn't have noticed.
I would not have noticed. That's correct. I was thinking that, and then I got distracted. Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to say.
If you think about it's trying to, I guess, kill or whatever. Nothing's going to kill Overwatch but Overwatch.
Something to compete against. What it's trying to compete with.
If you remove Reinhardt.
You'd notice.
If you remove Tracer.
Yeah.
if you remove Soldier 76,
Yeah.
if you removed Reaper, it's like I can name any one of these characters. You know who they are. Symmetra. It's like maybe
Even the ones I don't like, even the ones that I think are bad, like Sigma, I still know him.
Yeah.
Right? There's a clear theme to him. He's the guy with the tiny legs and the massive shoulders, and he talks about how the world sings for him, and and he's very polite, all the time.
Yeah.
Like, he has a personality. I don't even like that character, but I know who he is.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I have a ton of criticisms of Overwatch, and I think Overwatch in its modern existence is the worst version of Overwatch. But when we're talking about the idea of hero shooters, Overwatch still exists and has dedicated players.
There is still no other company that's actually achieved anything close to what's achieved. I'll be very frank.
Apex is as close as you're going to get, and that's a battle royale.
I don't think they were really, because
they're more competing with Fortnite than they are with.
Yeah, they're not really competing with Overwatch as much because they have Overwatch has shurikens, lasers, and all this stuff. No one else is trying to do what they're doing.
No, and it. But what you can do is you can trace it back. You go where did these decisions start? Mm-hmm. And those decisions started with someone who had these ideas. And I don't have, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I don't have a better term than woke to describe the mindset. But it is a mindset that sets out to do something.
I think it's rather than you're cooking, you're following a recipe.
I would say it's not that you're following a recipe. I would say that you have decided that you want a pastry that looks like a cookie, but it has M&Ms in it, but you're not going to use M&Ms. You want to use something else. And you've never baked before, but you're pretty sure you know how it works. Mm-hmm. And so you've set out, and through trial and error, you've created a cookie. But what you did was you took chocolate chunks and you just dyed them with food coloring, right? You have a conclusion in mind,
but you have no idea what the substance.
You have no idea what the substance is, and because of that mindset, you never actually asked yourself, how do I actually make this good?
You're like an AI.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about when I say that there is such a thing here. And there are just people, what we forget is a lot of the discussions around cultural issues. Mm-hmm. Those battles, we're millennials, those battles started when we were children.
Yeah.
And we've been fighting with each other about these issues for a long time. Well, I'm 34 now. So, and I was in a middle management position at a major company. Mm-hmm. A lot of people I know are. A lot of people who have certain ideologies are in certain positions of power now. And now we said for years, make your own game. If you don't like what exists, make your own game. So they did. That's what happened. Mm-hmm. Those people said, I will. And in some cases, they made a good enough thing that their progressive ideals were able to integrate. And those things are successful. And in some cases, they did not. I would like to think back to ignoring Mass Effect 3, which was garbage. Mass Effect 2, I think, was a pretty good game. And Mass Effect 2 lets you be gay, it lets you be straight. And I don't think anyone actually has a problem with that. There are people who make characters. There are women who play male shep and then have gay romances. There are men who play femme shep to have gay romances. And there are people of both of those who play the same sex as themselves to have straight or gay romances. Mm-hmm. And I know people who are straight men who have played male shep to gay romance a character or played femme shep to straight romance Garrus, right? But they themselves are very straight, and I know women who have done that. And it's there's so many different people who they don't really have. Their own sexuality isn't heavily tied to how they absorb these characters or what's happening. And I would not consider that game. I would consider the third game. That's where you can tell that a bunch of executives were let's try to get the romance. Let's try to get the rainbow points, right? But Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 1, they didn't set out to do that, right? They may have said, oh, maybe we can try to test the water to be a little bit more progressive, and that happened in the first game. And then they, stuck their They stuck their whole foot in with the second game. But I don't think anyone retroactively looks back at that and goes, that was super woke. It's not. It just gives you options. And it gives you whatever option you want. The game doesn't force it on you.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't tell you you have to do this thing.
It's the customer's always right in their what they want and taste.
And so, you know, if someone tells me, like when I talk about what's the game? Cyberpunk 2077. Ignoring all the other issues, one of my biggest complaints about that game is that there's like 4 people you can romance, 2 men, 2 women, and everyone's like, yeah, well, those characters have preferences. Like, you can't romance anyone. You can't choose Judy or Pan Am. You have, if it is entirely based on your genitals. Whatever genitals you choose at character creation, you can only romance one character of one sex. And that, to me, you know, people are like, well, real people have preferences. I go, right, but this is a video game, and I only have 4 options. That's 3. 4 options, right? If
you don't even have 4 options depending on what you pick, from what I understand.
Well, yeah. Well, that's my point, is that in the whole game, across all character creation, you have 4 options. I mean, you can have sex with that one woman, but that doesn't really count, right? Like you have I'm going to put up the right number of fingers this time. You have 4 options, and then based on your genitals, you have 2 options. I can do this. Trust me.
You can count.
I get it. The 3 blades, but like, but
this time it's your fault.
The farmer, the tailor, and the cook.
Yeah, the blades represent actual blades.
If you're watching this and you don't know, please look up the video real Shenmue dialogue. But the barber uses a razor.
And it goes on for like an hour.
It's really long. But the so you know, when we're when we're talking about Cyberpunk, right? The problem is that you have 2 options. So if you want to have, you know, like if you want a woman, you know, if you want to date a woman on your playthrough, you have 1 choice based off of character creation. And in a game about choices, people have preferences is a perfectly reasonable answer when I have 50 choices. And you go, well, only about 25 of them are available to you because, you know, that they have preferences. Okay. But when you're telling me that I have 2 girls and 2 guys to choose from, and I'm only going to get to choose 1 of each based on character creation.
And you may or may not like them.
Yeah, and I may not like them. Like, if I'm playing a chick, I still want to date Pan Am. I don't want to date Judy, right? And like, but I'm not allowed to, right? So it's one of those things where, and what determines it is different. Sometimes it's the body you choose, and sometimes it's the genitals you choose.
Oh, that's
it's different. Yeah, it's different based on the character.
That's just more. It's just like you did more work for yourself just for.
Yeah, and so I don't, you know, that's not a good answer for limited options when the options are already so limited. You can have that sort of, well, we want to represent that different people have different preferences when you've got a million options, but you can't do that when you've got so few. But I think options are good because people are different. Some people are going to want different things when they play the game. And if you're going to allow romance, you should provide a variety. And if someone goes, oh, why is every character bisexual? It's like, because in your story, they're not. When you play the game, they are eusexual, whatever that is.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's like they're not off in the background just like having, it's like I like both sides. It's like, no, when you chose a character, that is the sexual they became.
That is the sexual they became, right. And that is fine. And there are people who would say that's woke, and I go, no, that's good business. Right? That's making a good product.
And also easy for coding.
Very easy for coding. So, you know, because it's interesting when we started this discussion, when you brought this up, because I have thought about this a lot recently, because I see it online all the time. I saw people trying to attack Space Marine 2. First, they were trying to say it was progressive because the one Cadian officer was a woman. And I was like,
How does that make
You're a 40K tourist. Go away. And then these reviewers were trying to attack it after that one developer came out and said we didn't want to include any real world politics. We just wanted to make we wanted to return to the days of Halo, right? And if you think about it, there are women and men in positions of power, authority, and combat in Halo.
That's true.
And it never feels like preaching. It just feels like, well, yeah.
Well,
Of course there would be.
I don't like the idea of we want to keep politics out of it. I think it's more we don't want to force an ideology on you.
Well, what he was trying to express, because I was paraphrasing him, it's a paragraph on a comment on a video, right?
That's fine.
Is what he was trying to express is that they wanted to make something detached from the narratives going on. Because one of the mistakes people make is when someone says, don't bring politics into it, they go, what are you talking about? This is a game literally about governments fighting. It's literally politics. I go, well, no. When someone says, don't bring politics, what they mean is I don't want to talk about Trump and Biden, right? Yeah. I don't want to talk about real world political issues as they relate to right now. I want whatever politics are happening are only relevant to that world.
Yeah.
What's happening there. And you can always tell when what is happening is because of the author's personal politics versus it's just something they thought up of while making the story.
Yeah, it's just the politics that's happening.
An author's personal politics will always somewhat shape it because you can't separate your own mind from your creation.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between the passive influence and the purposeful insertion of, right? The difference between, someone going, I feel like when they're making the Spartans, they'd kidnap male and female children. And so some of the Spartans would be girls. There's that. And then there's Family Guy having Trump show up at the front door, right? And these things are different, right? One of these things is making a joke at the expense of a real world thing. And one of them is an author going, I feel like this would happen, Or what if they just said, I like strong women. It's hot. So I want my Spartans to be women too. And I'd be like, I forgot what it was. I was having a conversation with, our mutual friends. I was having a conversation with them the other day. And I said, we were talking about a topic, and we were talking about why people do this thing. And I won't go into the details too much, but because it'll derail the whole conversation. It'll change the subject.
Was it about, liking a strong woman makes you gay?
No, I'm not going to say what the details were because I don't want to derail. But only to make the point that what I said was, when people make this one argument for it as if it has something to do with the core of who they are, that's kind of cringe compared to when someone goes, yeah, it just makes me horny. When someone goes, yeah, I just get off to it, I actually kind of respect it more because most humans are horny. Most humans are stupid when they're horny. And, it's very relatable, right? So I may still go, well, it's kind of just, you're kind of just inserting your fetish. But, yeah, I mean, that's fair. I can empathize, right? I don't know. There's something about it that feels a little bit more normal than when you try to turn something into your whole personality. I kind of think about that when, if I were to relate it to something, it's it's with anything sexual, really. Right? When someone lives something in every fiber of their being, and they're like, this is who I truly am. And it's they never stop talking about it. I'm like, wow. But when they go, yeah, I just think it's hot. I'm like, oh, it's kind of weird, but I guess I kind of relate. You know what I mean?
I guess I just don't understand pinning yourself to an idea that much.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean is one of these things is becoming the entirety of you. And one of these things is just a preference for something.
I guess.
Why did you give all your characters fat asses? I just like fat asses. Is a reasonable answer.
I guess one of the reasons I brought up this topic is the anger people have confuses me. It feels like so much effort into something that is sometimes just nothing. It's
So I've run into this issue where I'll talk about a subject, like people ask my opinion on it, and I'll form like an intellectual answer on it. Like I'll think about it, I'll form an opinion. Maybe I've heard it and already formed an opinion. So I give like an opinion and I stand by my opinion. They go, wow, you're really invested in this. And I go, I do not care at all about the outcome of this. And they go, well, you seem really passionate. And I go, I formed an opinion and I believe I'm right.
I've thought more than you have.
Like, you've made the mistake of believing my ability to passionately express my perspective is the same thing as emotional investment. Regardless of the outcome, I do not care. My life will continue, for it has no bearing on my existence. But I have formed an opinion based on analysis. Well, why'd you care to analyze it? Because that's what I do.
Because you care to bring it up.
Because you care to bring it up, and because it exists in my space, and because I find critical analysis entertaining. It stimulates me to do it's my fetish. Like, that's what if I said it gets me off, would that make you relate better? You know what I mean?
I think I get it.
Now I'm understanding. Yeah, that's that is how I feel about a lot of these things. If you ask me, do I care? You know, people are cheering for the downfall of Concord, and I go, I don't care. I take that back. I think there is a world in which I care, and I know what that is. And it's a slight aside. I was talking about this game that's coming out in early access in a couple games, and it's nowhere near finished. It's called Forever Winter. It's sort of like a Tarkov. I don't want to say Tarkov ripoff, but it's an extraction shooter type game, except all the other extraction shooters that have ever existed were trying to be PvP, right? And extraction shooters at their core are just battle royales, with higher stakes, and you loot stuff, and then you there's no number one victory royale. You win by leaving, right? So it's an extraction shooter in that you go in, you get stuff, and you leave, but there's no PvP. The idea behind the game is you're a scavenger, and there's this war going on between these different factions, and they're in like a forever world war. And they called it PvEVE. The concept is that the armies are fighting each other, and you've entered the spaces that they're in to try to scavenge things.
Oh, yeah, that's
right?
interesting.
But your objective is not to strictly be part of these fights. You're a third party, right? And
you're kind of the villager when two countries go at war. You're just trying to survive.
Right. And so you are, you'll get missions sometimes from those factions. But at the end of the day, you're doing it for the rewards. You're not doing it because you believe one faction should win. And this can mean that you'll get reputation or whatever, but the whole game is centered around being cooperative. It is very early access. I mean, if you look this game up, there's a lot of issues, and the developers are not pretending that it's not. They're only releasing it early access because people played the betas, and they were like, I really want to continue to play as it develops. But they're also not pretending that it is in a good place.
Well, to be very frank, recently I've been playing this game called Metaphysical that's just trash.
Yeah, okay. I've never heard of it, but
I'm
just going to adjust your mic.
Probably for a good reason. It has all the features, all of them implemented badly, but it's with friends, it's very fun.
Yeah, and I think it's going to turn out well. But so why am I bringing it up? It's not to promote the game. It's because one of the things I've said to the guys that I stream with on Monday and stuff, as I said, I might seem a little very invested in this game. I'm not trying to convince anyone to like it. It's rough right now. I can see that it's rough. It's not, the second it comes out, it's going to be still rough, and it's not going to be God's gift to gaming. But the reason that I'm so enthusiastic about it is I really like what appears to be the motivation of the developers. They have something they want to make, and they've regularly said, we want to go back to when you buy a game, you get a game. You don't get a bunch of microtransactions. You don't get all this other stuff. You don't just get a PvP game. It's a cooperative game that you play with your friends, and it's a complete product, and that's what we want, right? That's what we want to create. So we're not going to sell you maps. We're not going to sell you characters. We want to, you may buy the game as early access, and that's fine, and the game will need to have more content added, but we want to make a complete product at the end that you've paid the full price for and received the full thing. And and they don't have the major backing of any AAA studio or investor.
That's interesting. How? I'm sorry if I'm sidetracking. Are they doing like peer-to-peer servers?
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that they've said is so it was really funny. If you go on the Steam page, the first video that plays is quite ballsy. It's because it's kind of cringy, right? It's a dev LARPing as one of the characters in the game. And the way they talk, the tone, it sounds very much like moralistic, like, that tone of like, we know what you care about. We believe in, it sounds like this guy doesn't know how to be PR, right? Yeah. This is not a PR guy. But it's clear that it's genuine, right? Like, and as you watch the video, they say straight up things. They say, we've seen what's happened with recent releases and our peers in the industry, with servers that can't handle the player capacity, with servers going down, maintenance stopping you from playing, which is why we made the decision to make it so that you can play either peer-to-peer online with a host or local. So if you have no internet, but you have 3 computers connected to each other, you can play.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and he said the reason is because if we go out of business, you should still be allowed to play this game. And, peer-to-peer has its issues as well, but at the end of the day, as long as something has peer-to-peer, it never dies. Yeah.
I would have liked it if they said you could host your own server, but I could.
Well, they probably. I mean, I think if you said, "Hey, can I set a third computer to be a server?" They'd be like, "Maybe that's a feature we can add," or someone can create using a dev kit. Like, who knows? Okay. It's early. It's early game, but the point is it's not the result that exists now. It's the motivation and the idea. Yeah. They want to create something that lasts. And why did I bring this up? Again, it's not, I know I sound very enthusiastic, and so it sounds like a promotion. I am promising you this is not there's going to be so much negative feedback when the early access comes out, because even though it's right there and everyone can see that it's not actually a feature-complete game, they don't understand. They're going to say negative things, and they'll be accurate, if not fair. But I bring it up because what I was saying to the Monday crew is that I was saying I want these things to exist because people and developers and creatives have forgotten that they can exist. Yeah. So I want it to be made, I want it to be good, and I want it to be successful, not just because it's a game I want, but because of what it represents, of the ability to create something absent all these other influences.
And hopefully it can show that it can be successful as well.
Exactly. I often, Lucas doesn't like Phasmophobia. I reference it a lot because he is not to attack him, but because he is the strongest opinion in my space against Phasmophobia. And actually his criticism's all really accurate. It's repetitive, blah, blah, blah. I like the game, but I also there's a reason I haven't played it in a very long time. But one of the things I always praise about that game is one guy set out, he had an idea, and he said, I'm going to make it. And he used the tools that were available to make it, which means it's Unity, right? But it was very unique. Nothing like it existed, and it was fun.
You also don't really have to pay for any DLC or
anything. There is none. And so he made a bajillion dollars. It was insanely successful, and he sold a bajillion copies. What did he do? What do most people do? They abandon it and go do something else.
He's in fact improved it.
He hired employees. He bought, rights to assets that or created them himself, and he improved the game. And that we want more of that. More of I'm invested in creating something good.
Yeah. Splitgate's doing something similar, but they had a battle pass and stuff like that. But they're still making a whole new game based on this funding they got just because they've gotten so much support.
Yeah, and you can sit around and nitpick things like battle passes and skins and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, there is I'm not looking for the golden goose. Yeah. I'm just looking for there's something actually, speaking of Lucas, that he said even just earlier today, is he said it's not just that AAA games are not fundamentally not cohesive. They are not fundamentally aligned with something being good, but that they are fundamentally the antithesis of something being good. And the reason is because a AAA title is something where every single edge has been sanded down smooth, rounded, so that there's nothing about it that could offend, so it can be as mainstream as possible. Which ironically goes back to the art style of Concord.
Yeah.
Everything is round, everything is tubes, everything is soft. It's as dull and inoffensive as you can possibly be, to the point of being nothing.
That's kind of interesting, because that makes me wonder, what is GTA 6 going to be like?
I'm very interested, because the thing about GTA is it's offensive.
Yeah.
Right? And people say, well, I don't necessarily think that stuff is needed. And I go, it's not. That's a hard thing to answer, because in some cases you're right. It seems like edginess for edginess' sake.
I think it's just commentary on how it's like people think of things in the society. It's like in the different eras, the specific, it's like if you don't have some like commentary on like podcasts, that would be kind of weird.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that when you looked at GTA, what it was a bunch of exaggerated examples of real things that exist.
Yeah.
Right? Like there were people out there killing each other and cussing all the time and running over hookers, and that's like a real thing. But then they make it like extreme. You know? Sorry, you were saying something.
And it's like, I remember playing through it as more of an adult. It's like I kind of understood the satire, and that is the main theme of GTA to me, is they are satirizing what we see in society.
There's a statement I say that I always get pushback on, and that statement is that comedy is innately offensive. And I've had people go, that's not true. And I go, no matter what, if you are making a joke, there is something that is being made fun of. That thing may have no one to get offended for it, but something is being made fun of. And when you make fun of something, that innately is an offense. Whether you choose to take the offense is up to you, because a lesson in social philosophy, offense is only ever taken. You don't, even if someone gives offense, you don't have to take it if you don't want to. And if someone doesn't give offense and you take it anyway, they're not the villain because you took the offense, right? You could say, well, what that thing was, I find offensive. It's like, right, but they weren't giving offense. They weren't attacking you. The intent was not to harm you. So while you might have a social commentary about the way, oh, I wouldn't say that thing out in public because you might cause problems, there's no moral wrong that has happened. You're choosing to create one. Comedy is about making fun of things, but comedy is not actually generally about harming people. Some people may mean harm, but in and of itself, the intent of comedy is to produce laughter, you know, and some comedy you could say is derived from something negative. Like, let's say you had a group of extremists and they all were of the same religious, ethnic or cultural group, and they were making fun of another religious, ethnic or cultural group because they hated that group. You could say that is not good. Yeah. We could agree on that. But what's happening there isn't the joke is the problem. What's happening is that
their group intent is not good.
Their intent is not good, because if you had that same group of people, but they were all friends hanging out in a room and they were making the joke and everybody laughed, it's because the intent was just to make a joke about something we all know. It's Ahmed the dead terrorist, right? Who's being attacked in that scenario? Well, the terrorists. And we are all in agreement that terrorists do not deserve our respect, so we're not offended. But it is offensive to someone. There's always a butt of a joke. Everything is, some of those things may not be able to feel offense or may not be present to be offended, but every joke has something is the butt of the joke. And you can tell when people have lost note of that, because you look at certain comedians where they go up on stage and they don't do anything funny because they're so rounded and sand down and inoffensive that it's not funny at all. Everyone talks about how Weird Al is such a great guy. He doesn't curse. He doesn't do all this stuff. All his songs still make fun of someone. You just didn't realize it. When the song that I love from him that talks about corporate buzzwords, right? It's like, through corporate ideology, we will achieve synergy. And it's like, or is management ideology. And it's like, That's funny because we've all been in a corporate environment and we know how stupid that is. That's also at the expense of the people that say those things. And while most of them will probably laugh because they're like, yeah, I do that. That is what corporations are like. Yeah. There might be someone who thinks that kind of stuff is really cool and good and will be offended. Someone is the butt of that joke. You just don't know them. And probably they'll laugh too. So when you remove all of the offensive things from GTA, you end up with nothing.
What is it about anymore?
What is it about? The whole thing's a satire. So what's it about?
Was it satirizing?
Yeah. What is it satirizing? Saints Row was funny because GTA 4 was just about hanging out with your buddy Roman and looking at big American titties. Let's go bowling, cousin. And that was unfun. And Saints Row came out, and it was like you were just joining a gang and doing gang war. And it was satirizing everything. What was his name? Johnny...
I have no idea.
You know who I'm talking... Johnny Gat.
Oh.
Johnny Gat, every time Johnny Gat is in the game, he gets killed. And then the next time he shows up in the game, he's just got like he gets shot with an AK-47 like 10 times in the chest, falls over dead. And then the next mission he shows up with a cast. That's funny, right? It's funny because it's making fun of so many things at once. It's making fun of his character. It's making fun of action characters. It's making a joke about he got shot, but he's wearing a cast. It's making a joke about characters who come back and made in stories, right?
Yeah.
And it's making fun of gang violence. It's satirizing a lot of things at once. And that's funny. And that was really good because that's what the previous GTA games had that GTA 4 still had but had lost. And then in GTA 5, they brought it all back. It felt more like San Andreas than GTA 4 did. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I remember playing, I think it was San Andreas on the PS2 and GTA 5. I actually skipped GTA 4.
Well, you didn't miss anything. And I'm sure someone will get mad at me for saying that. They are wrong, and my opinion is the better one. I did it! I did the thing! The thing we love. I love when they say it.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. I am the lethal weapon, too. Mm-hmm. Anyway, do you feel that we covered the subject that you had in mind fully and completely?
I believe so. I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing this up. This is why I let you come up with the topic, is because you surprise me every time, and it ends up being related to something I've thought about without even thinking we were going to cover it.
Well, you see, one of these days I'm going to surprise you with how little I surprise you.
That's true. Well, it's going to turn out you just live in my walls. This is actually my house. I didn't even know. The drive here was actually like, I was actually just me going in a big circle without realizing.
It was just prey.
Well, I appreciate the conversation today. And hey, if you watched this all the way through, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's still very bare bones and we're still getting the hang of it. But thank you so much for watching. And we will see you next time for more of why our opinions are the better ones. Catch you later.
Mine specifically.